What's up everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating and deadly aspects of George R.R. Martin's universe, the legendary Valyrian Steel Weapons. These aren't just ordinary swords and blades, these are artifacts of immense power, steeped in magic, mystery, and bloodshed. From the smoking ruins of Valyria to the frozen wastes beyond the wall, Valyrian steel has shaped the destiny of Westeros in ways you might not even realize. So what exactly makes Valyrian steel so special? Well, let me tell you, this isn't your average castle forged metal. Valyrian steel was manufactured in the ancient Valyrian Freehold, and here's where things get interesting. It was spell forged with the assistance of dragons and dragonflame. That's right. Magic and dragons played a crucial role in creating these legendary weapons. The result is a metal that's lighter, stronger, and sharper than even the finest steel produced anywhere else in the known world. Now, here's the tragic part. When the doom of Valyria struck, that cataclysmic event that destroyed the greatest civilization the world had ever known, the secret of forging new Valyrian steel was lost forever. Think about that for a moment. The knowledge, the spells, the techniques, all gone in a single apocalyptic event. What this means is that every Valyrian steel weapon that exists today is literally irreplaceable. You can't make new ones, you can only work with what already exists. But wait, there's a glimmer of hope in this darkness. While the art of creating new Valyrian steel died with Valyria, the ability to rework existing Valyrian steel survived. In all the world, only the master smiths of Qohor, that mysterious free city in Essos, have preserved this ancient art. These craftsmen jealously guard their secrets, the spells and techniques needed to reforge Valyrian steel without losing its legendary properties. And trust me, they take the secrecy seriously. Archmeister Pol of the Citadel learned this the hard way. He spent years in Qohor trying to uncover their secrets for his treatise on Qohoric metalworking. The result? He was publicly whipped 3 times and eventually cast out. The final time, they even cut off his hand after accusing him of stealing a Valyrian steel blade. That's how seriously these smiths protect their knowledge. So how many Valyrian steel weapons are we talking about here? According to Archmeister Thurgood's inventories, there are only 227 such weapons in all of Westeros, just 27 blades in an entire continent, and some of those have been lost or disappeared from recorded history. Meanwhile, there may be thousands scattered throughout the known world, particularly in Essos, but even there, they're incredibly rare and valuable. Most of these weapons in Westeros are treasured heirlooms of noble houses, each with its own name and storied history. Even the poorest, most impoverished noble families refuse to part with their Valyrian steel, no matter the price offered. And speaking of price, let's talk about Lord Tywin Lannister for a moment. The richest man in Westeros, a man who could buy almost anything he desired, tried on at least 3 separate occasions to purchase Valyrian steel swords from lesser houses. Every single time, he was refused. These little lordlings, as the text describes them, would gladly part with their daughters if a Lannister came asking, but their old family swords? Never. That tells you everything you need to know about the true value of these weapons. Now, what makes Valyrian steel visually distinctive? If you're holding one of these blades, you'll immediately notice the rippled patterns visible in the metal. This is the mark of steel that has been folded back on itself thousands upon thousands of times, similar to Damascus steel from our world. Most Valyrian steel has a dark gray color, almost appearing black, though it can be treated and colored differently. When Tobho Mott reforged ice into 2 new swords, he attempted to tint them crimson for House Lannister, but the Valyrian steel absorbed the color in its own unique way, creating ripples of nearly black, gray, and red almost as dark as the gray. But here's what really sets Valyrian steel apart: its magical properties. These blades never lose their edge. A sword that's hundreds of years old will be just as sharp as the day it was forged. Nothing holds an edge like Valyrian steel. And perhaps most importantly for the wars to come, no common fire can damage it, not even dragonflame. When King Aegon I Targaryen died in 37 AC, his body was burned in a funeral pyre with his hands folded over the hilt of Blackfyre. The dragon-lit flames darkened the blade, but the sword was otherwise completely unharmed. And then there's the most crucial property of all. Valyrian steel is one of only 2 known substances that can kill White Walkers, the other being dragon glass. This property isn't widely known in the world of ice and fire, and apparently not even the White Walkers themselves knew about it until they encountered it in battle. This makes every single Valyrian steel weapon potentially crucial in the wars against the others. Now let's talk about the most famous and storied Valyrian steel weapons in Westeros, starting with the two ancestral swords of House Targaryen. First up is Blackfyre, arguably the most famous Valyrian steel sword in all of history. This hand-and-a-half long sword was wielded by Aegon the Conqueror himself during his conquest of the Seven Kingdoms. After Aegon, it became the treasured blade of House Targaryen, carried by kings and princes. When kings held court, Blackfyre was used as a scepter, a symbol of royal authority as much as a weapon. The sword was passed down through every Targaryen king until we get to Aegon IV, also known as Aegon the Unworthy. And here's where things get complicated. In 182 AC, King Aegon IV made a fateful decision. Instead of passing Blackfyre to his legitimate son Daeron, a scholarly type who wasn't much of a warrior, he bestowed it upon his bastard son Daemon Waters, a born warrior who excelled with the blade. Daemon was only 12 years old when he was knighted and received Blackfyre. Many saw this as a sign that Aegon favored his bastard son over his legitimate heir. Daemon took the name of the sword for his own, becoming Daemon Blackfyre, and founded House Blackfyre. On his deathbed, Aegon IV legitimized all his bastard children, and this set the stage for one of the bloodiest conflicts in Westerosi history, the Blackfyre Rebellion. The possession of Blackfyre lent legitimacy to Daemon's claim to the throne. After all, as Sir Eustace Osgrey said, Blackfyre was the sword that every Targaryen king had wielded since the conquest. Daemon died during the rebellion at the Battle of the Red Grass Field, and the sword was taken by his half-brother Aegor Rivers, known as Bittersteel. Bittersteel brought Blackfyre into exile in the Free Cities, founding the Golden Company with dreams of one day returning to Westeros. But here's the mystery. After Bittersteel's death, the whereabouts of Blackfyre became unknown. To this day, no one knows where this legendary blade ended up. The sister sword to Blackfyre is Dark Sister, and it has an equally fascinating history. This longsword is more slender than Blackfyre, with its blade designed for a woman's hand. It may have been forged specifically for a female warrior originally. Dark Sister was wielded by Queen Visenya Targaryen, Aegon's older sister and wife, who was every bit as much a warrior as her brother. Visenya trained in combat since childhood and was skilled enough to demonstrate the inadequacy of the Kingsguard by cutting Aegon's cheek with Dark Sister before any of his guards could react. This demonstration led to the formation of the Kingsguard as we know it. Visenya bestowed Dark Sister on her son Maegor when he came of age, but when his brother Aenys became king, Maegor was given Blackfyre instead. Dark Sister then passed through various hands. After Visenya's death, Alyssa Velaryon escaped from Dragonstone and took Dark Sister, giving it to her son Jaehaerys, who would become one of the greatest kings in Targaryen history. Later, it was wielded by Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight, considered the greatest jouster and swordsman of his era. Eventually, Dark Sister came into the possession of Brynden Rivers, known as Bloodraven, one of the great bastards of King Aegon IV. Bloodraven used Dark Sister at the Battle of the Red Grass Field during the Blackfyre Rebellion. After slaying Daemon Blackfyre with arrows, he crossed swords with Bittersteel himself and drove him from the field, though he lost an eye in the duel. When Bloodraven was eventually sent to the Night's Watch as Lord Commander, he presumably brought Dark Sister with him. And here's where it gets really interesting. Bloodraven disappeared beyond the wall and became the Three-Eyed Crow, the mysterious figure who appears in Bran Stark's visions. This means Dark Sister may still be beyond the wall, possibly in the cave where Bran learns from the Three-Eyed Raven. Some fans theorize it could eventually be found by Mira Reed, Arya Stark, or even Jon Snow. Now, let's move to the north and talk about Ice, the ancestral greatsword of House Stark. This wasn't just any Valyrian steel sword, it was massive, taller than a full-grown man, and as wide as someone's hand. Ice had been in the Stark family's possession for 4 centuries, used both in warfare and ceremonies, though it was most often used for executions. Eddard Stark wielded it to execute the Night's Watch deserter in the very first chapter of A Game of Thrones. But Ice's story takes a dark turn. After Ned's execution in King's Landing, Ice was captured by House Lannister. Lord Tywin, who had tried unsuccessfully for years to acquire a Valyrian steel sword for his house, finally had one. But rather than keep Ice as it was, he had it reforged. Tywin hired Tobho Mott, a master smith from Qohor, who knew the spells to rework Valyrian steel. Because Ice was so large, there was enough steel to create two entirely new longswords. The first blade became Widow's Wail, given to King Joffrey as a wedding gift. Joffrey chose that grotesque name himself from a shouted suggestion at the ceremony. After Joffrey's death at his own wedding feast, the sword passed to his brother Tommen. Later, Jaime Lannister took possession of Widow's Wail. The second blade from Ice was given to Jaime by Tywin, but Jaime, unable to wield it effectively after losing his sword hand, gave it to Brienne of Tarth. She named it Oathkeeper, swearing to use it to fulfill her oath to Catelyn Stark by protecting her daughters. Both swords bear the dark gray and deep red ripples that mark them as descended from Ice. Moving to Bear Island, we have Longclaw, the ancestral bastard sword of House Mormont. This blade had been in the Mormont family for 5 centuries before it came into Jon Snow's possession. Lord Commander Jorah Mormont gave Longclaw to Jon after Jon saved his life from a white. Before presenting it to Jon, the pommel was redesigned from a bear, the sigil of House Mormont, to a dire wolf, representing Jon's Stark heritage. Longclaw became one of the most important weapons in the fight against the others after Jon used it to kill a White Walker, discovering the blade's ability to shatter their icy forms. House Tarly of Horn Hill possesses Heartsbane, an ancestral two-handed greatsword that had been in the family for 5 centuries. The hilt is wrought in the shape of a bow and arrow, with the crossguard forming the limbs of a bow, reflecting House Tarly's sigil of the huntsman. Heartsbane was traditionally passed from father to son, but Samwell Tarly broke that tradition. Despite his father Lord Randall's contempt for him and despite lacking martial skill, Sam stole Heartsbane when he left Horn Hill. This act represented both a significant break from his past and, more importantly, it preserved another Valyrian weapon for the wars to come. Sam eventually gave Heartsbane to Jorah Mormont to wield in the fight against the dead. In the Vale, House Corbray possesses Lady Forlorn, their ancestral Valyrian steel sword. This blade has a heart-shaped ruby set in its pommel, reflecting House Corbray's sigil of 3 ravens carrying 3 hearts. The sword has a distinctive smoke gray blade and is currently wielded by Sir Lyn Corbray. Lady Forlorn has been passed down through generations of House Corbray and represents one of the few Valyrian steel swords in the Vale. The Iron Islands have their own collection of Valyrian steel, and their stories are particularly interesting because, well, you know how the Ironborn are. They don't buy things, they take them. Nightfall is the prized Valyrian steel longsword of House Harlaw. The sword is distinguished by its moonstone pommel and is currently wielded by Sir Harris Harlaw. The origins of how House Harlaw acquired Nightfall are shrouded in mystery, but it was initially owned by Lord Dalton Greyjoy, known as the Red Kraken, who claimed the sword from a fallen corsair. Nightfall has been instrumental in many battles, and Sir Harris has achieved numerous victories wielding it. Then there's Red Rain, the Valyrian steel sword of House Drum of Old Wick. True to Ironborn tradition, this blade was taken in a raid, not purchased or inherited through peaceful means. There's considerable speculation that Red Rain once belonged to House Rain, the family that Tywin Lannister famously destroyed, the family immortalized in the song The Rains of Castamere. Given the name and the crimson coloring, it's very possible this theory is correct. House Drum continues to wield Red Rain, having paid what they call the iron price for it. Now, let's talk about some of the lost Valyrian steel swords, because their stories are just as important as those we can still account for. Brightroar was the ancestral Valyrian steel greatsword of House Lannister, lost long before the main event of the series. According to historical records, the Kings of the Rock purchased Brightroar from the Valyrians about a century before the Doom. They paid enough gold to raise an army for this single sword. Brightroar was wielded by notable Lannister patriarchs. King Lancel IV Lannister used it to behead the Ironborn king, Harold Half-Drowned. Later, King Tommen II Lannister wielded the blade when he sailed with a massive fleet to plunder the ruins of Valyria after the Doom. Tommen, his entire fleet, and Brightroar were all lost in that voyage. For generations, Lannisters attempted to recover Brightroar. The most recent attempt was made by Gerion Lannister, Tywin's younger brother, who left Westeros in 291 AC to find the sword. By the time of the main story, Gerion had not returned and is presumed being dead. This loss of Brightroar explains why Tywin was so desperate to acquire another Valyrian steel sword for his house. It wasn't just about prestige, it was about restoring something that had been lost. Lamentation was the Valyrian steel sword of House Royce, one of the most powerful houses in the Vale. This sword was lost over a century before the main event of the story. The circumstances of its loss remain unclear, but neither Sir Waymar Royce, who was killed by White Walkers in the prologue, nor Lord Jon, Bronze Jon Royce ever possessed it. The loss of Lamentation represents one of the many Valyrian steel weapons that have disappeared from recorded history. Vigilance was the ancestral sword of House Hightower of Old Town. Like Lamentation, Vigilance was lost during or after the Dance of the Dragons, that brutal civil war that nearly destroyed House Targaryen. The sword was wielded by Lord Ormond Hightower during that conflict. After his death, the sword's whereabouts became unknown, adding another lost blade to the tally. And then we have the weapons that don't quite fit into the usual categories but are no less important. There's the Valyrian Steel Dagger, the one used in the attempted assassination of Bran Stark. This dagger has a dragon bone hilt and passed through many hands, including Petyr Baelish, who lied about losing it in a bet to Tyrion Lannister. Eventually, Littlefinger gave it to Bran, who gave it to Arya. This dagger became one of the most consequential weapons in all of Westeros when Arya used it to kill the Night King, ending the threat of the White Walkers. There's speculation that this dagger originally belonged to the Targaryens, possibly taken by Robert Baratheon from Rhaegar after killing him at the Trident. The books mention other Valyrian steel weapons as well. Euron Greyjoy is described as wearing a suit of black scale armor that Aeron Damphair believes to be Valyrian steel. If true, this would be worth a kingdom, as Valyrian steel armor is even rarer than Valyrian steel swords. Euron also gives daggers of Valyrian steel to Ironborn captains during the King's Moot on Old Wick. There's even mention of a Valyrian steel arach wielded by the sellsword Cago during the siege of Astapor. This shows that Valyrian steel weapons exist in various forms throughout Essos as well, not just in Westeros. It's worth noting that not every legendary sword is Valyrian steel. Dawn, the sword of House Dane, is often confused with Valyrian steel, but it was actually forged from a fallen meteorite. While it shares some properties with Valyrian steel, particularly its exceptional sharpness and milky white appearance, it's a completely different type of metal. Similarly, Lightbringer, King Stannis Baratheon's sword, is not Valyrian steel despite its alleged magical properties and glowing appearance. So what does all this mean for the future of Westeros? With winter coming and the threat of the others looming, every single Valyrian steel weapon becomes crucial. These aren't just status symbols anymore. They are potentially the difference between life and death, between victory and extinction. With only 227 known Valyrian steel weapons in Westeros and some of those lost, the concentration of these blades in the hands of the living will play a major role in the wars to come. Think about it. Jon Snow has Longclaw, Brienne has Oathkeeper, Jaime now wields Widow's Wail, Arya has her dagger, Sam took Heartsbane. These weapons are gathering in the hands of those who will fight against the darkness. Meanwhile, legendary swords like Blackfyre and Dark Sister remain lost, potentially waiting to be rediscovered at crucial moments. The master smiths of Qohor can reforge Valyrian steel but cannot create new ones. This means every existing weapon is even more valuable than gold. As Lord Tywin discovered, you simply cannot buy these swords from their owners no matter how much you offer. They represent centuries of family history, pride, and legacy. They're tied to the identity of great houses in ways that transcend mere monetary value. But here's something to consider. If the secret of forging Valyrian steel involved dragons and dragonfire, and if dragons have returned to the world through Daenerys Targaryen, could the lost art potentially be rediscovered? It's an intriguing possibility that the books may yet explore, though even if the method were rediscovered, the spells and specific techniques would still be unknown, making any attempt to create new Valyrian steel incredibly difficult. The distribution of these weapons throughout Westeros tells its own story. The great houses of the north, the Vale, the Reach, and the Iron Islands each possess these blades, but notably, some of the most powerful houses lack them. House Baratheon has no Valyrian steel sword. House Martell of Dorne apparently has none either. This creates interesting dynamics of power and prestige that go beyond simple military might or political influence. And let's not forget the symbolic weight these weapons carry. When ice was melted down and reforged into 2 Lannister swords, it represented the destruction of House Stark's legacy. But in a twist of fate, one of those swords ended up in Brienne's hands, sworn to protect the Stark daughters. The other is now wielded by Jaime, who has his own complex relationship with the Starks. In a way, pieces of ice are still serving the North, just not in the way anyone expected. The story of Valyrian steel is ultimately a story about loss and legacy. These weapons survived from a civilization that destroyed itself, from an empire that thought itself invincible. They're reminders that even the mightiest powers can fall, but also that some things, some legacies, endure beyond even catastrophic destruction. Every Valyrian steel weapon in existence today is a fragment of that lost greatness, a piece of magic from a world that no longer exists. As we move toward the climax of A Song of Ice and Fire, whether in the books or adaptations, these weapons will undoubtedly play crucial roles. The ability to kill White Walkers makes them strategically essential. Their historical significance makes them symbolically powerful, and their absolute irreplaceability makes every loss potentially catastrophic. So there you have it. Every major Valyrian steel weapon in A Song of Ice and Fire, from the legendary Blackfyre and Dark Sister to the lost blades of Brightroar and Lamentation, from Jon's Longclaw to Arya's Dagger. These aren't just swords. They're pieces of living history, magical artifacts that connect the present to a lost age of dragons and sorcery. What do you think will happen to these legendary weapons? Will Dark Sister be found beyond the wall? Could Blackfyre resurface in the hands of a Blackfyre pretender? Will more Valyrian steel weapons be discovered, or will some be lost in the wars to come? Drop your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the lore of A Song of Ice and Fire, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content exploring the rich history and mysteries of Westeros. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.